Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 66 of 2-Minute Talk Tips. This week's tip comes to us from special guest Mario Porreca. Practice in the shower.
Practice in the shower. Believe it or not, it's something that I do that has changed the game for me. And it's because when you're in the shower, you don't have to think about what you're doing because you've done it so many times. So it's really easy, and it's a nice environment. It's typically warm and, all that stuff. So you can get in, it's quiet. You can get into a meditative state really easily. So while I'm in the shower, this is where I get my best ideas. I like to think about and imagine doing my talks and what I would say and how I would say it and what it's going to feel like, and really employ visualization so that you feel it and you experience it. Because if you can experience it there, once you're on that stage, you can just go back to that place. It's like you've already done it. It's like you've already been there. And visualization is such a powerful tool for both your conscious and unconscious mind, because your unconscious mind doesn't know the difference about whether you've actually really experienced that or it's just been a visualization. So you can really make yourself believe you've been there. You can draw on that past experience. And when you get there, you'll know what it's like. You've been there, you've done it, and you'll have much more confidence.
Stick around, and after the break, I'll talk more with Mario about mindset, work ethic, speech as meditation, overcoming the fear of public speaking, and so much more. Welcome back. Did you know that public speakers and podcasters have something in common? They both love to talk. It's funny how that works out, isn't it? This week's episode is longer than most because, we cover a lot of ground. Mario and I have a wide-ranging chat about everything from an obsessive work ethic to the state of flow, the idea of a peak state, Billy Joel, unique experiences, the idea of public speaking as a meditative act, dealing with fear, and so much more. Ultimately, though, it all comes back to two key concepts: service and mindset. Mario Porreca is a performer, chef, author, TV personality, speaker, and mindset performance strategist. His main focus is coaching busy achievers to align their mindset, purpose, and passion to experience life at a deeper, more profound level. So let's talk now with Mario about his story, how a mindset shift can help speakers, and why he structures his podcast, 10-Minute Mindset, the way he does. Hi, Mario. Welcome to 2-Minute Talk Tips. I'm thrilled to have you on the show this week.
Thanks so much, Bill. I'm so excited to be here. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to talk with you more.
Awesome. Now, you've got quite a lot of stuff going on these days. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey to how you got here, talking about mindset and with your training content and all of these fun and important projects you're doing?
Absolutely. I got here in kind of a roundabout way, so I'll take you back and we'll go through it.
I think all of us get where we're going in a roundabout way.
Straight lines really don't exist in the real world. However, it all started about 10 years ago. I was a chef, and that's where everything started. So if you talked to me then and you asked me where I would be in 10 years, right now I should own a couple of restaurants and be cooking full time and managing those properties and growing my restaurant empire. But that's just not how things ended up shaking out. What happened was, as a chef, I was at the #1 city club in America. I was doing very well. I was competing internationally, and I still love to cook and I still love food. But something happened over the 6 years when I was in the restaurant world. And what ended up happening was I ended up putting on a lot of weight, believe it or not, being around food all day long. And they say that, you should always taste everything that you make. Well, I tasted, and I tasted a lot, put it that way.
Well, you had to be thorough.
So exactly. They say never trust a skinny chef, right? But, So I ended up putting on a lot of weight, and it put me in this funk between the stress, because I was working very long hours, and the competitiveness of the environment and being there every single day and having that extra baggage, so to speak, with the weight. It put me in a funk all the way around in my life. And so the first thing I did to get out of that was I recognized and acknowledged that I needed to get back into physical shape because my energy level was so low. So my father being a chiropractor, I went to him and I said, whatever it is, I grew up around health and wellness and how important it was. So I said, whatever I need to do, help me out here. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I need to do something. He helped me out. He put me on a program, gave me the parameters, coached me through it. And I had a very profound result. I lost 70 pounds in 6 months.
Wow.
And that changed everything for me because I was an athlete all the way up until when I started cooking at the tender age of 18. And over that course of time, it was a whole different experience for me to be out of shape and not be going to the gym and not be training. And so once I lost all that weight, I started to feel like my old self again. My attitude changed. My mental clarity came back. I had more energy. I started working out again and I just was in a much better place mentally. So that was the first thing I noticed was how the physical and the mental really work together hand in hand. Your physiology is a huge part of your mindset. But the second thing that happened was at that point, because my results were so profound, people started asking me what I was doing and how I got there. So I started helping people on the side. I started coaching people to help them lose weight. And within 6 months, I was making more money coaching people to lose weight than I was cooking. And at that point is when I decided, I really haven't been intentional about trying to coach people. It's just been organically happening. I wonder what would happen if I put my attention on actually trying to do that. So at that point, I decided to go all in. I left the restaurant world and I began coaching people full time. At that time, what I noticed was after about 6 months of doing that full time, I had a lot of clients and nearly all of them would get results. They would hit the weight loss results that they had. So I'm coaching people to lose weight. And what I noticed was about half of them would lose the weight, transform their lives like I did, and keep the weight off and lead a healthier lifestyle, more active, more healthy, more energetic. But then the other half would get down to their goal. And then within the same time period, they would gain all the weight back, or they would even gain more. And I couldn't figure out why are half of these people losing it and making that positive change and keeping it off, and why are the other half going back to where they came from when they know how much better it feels to have lost the weight. They know how much healthier it is and how much more energy they have. Why are they going and regressing? And so I started to look at the two and compare them. And I started to do some research. And what I found was the biggest difference between the two were their mindset. And more specifically, their mindset towards their identity, meaning who they believed they were and what their goals were. So the people that lost the weight and kept it off, I found were people who would up-level their goals, meaning they didn't just want to lose it all to lose it all. They had clear and compelling reasons for wanting to lose it. And by the time they were very close to that goal, hitting their goal, they would automatically create a new goal that was in the future. So instead of just losing 25 pounds to go fit in, to look nice in their bathing suit, they were losing the weight for a specific reason, and then that reason would change. So they would go to, I want to lose 25 pounds to, now that I lost the weight, I want to put on 5 pounds of muscle, or I want to run a marathon, or I want to do something else. Whereas the people who would lose the weight and it would gain it back, they just wanted to get to that result as quickly as possible. And then once they got there, they would celebrate and feel good for a week or two, and then they didn't know what to do after that. And when you don't know what to do, and you don't make that identity shift of I'm now a new person, I'm not the same person I was when I started this, no matter what, when you look in the mirror, you still see that old person. And when you still see that person that used to be heavier, used to have those old habits, it's only a matter of time before you go back to that place, before you manifest it again in your life, and before you go back to that comfort zone of those old habits. And so mindset became the differentiating factor for me between people who would maintain results and people who would, because I always say success is not only can you get the result, but can you maintain the result? That's the biggest differentiating factor there. Anyone can lose weight. Anyone can make more money. Anyone can travel more. Anyone can find a new relationship, but can you hold on to that? Can you keep those results? And that comes down to shifting your identity, becoming the person that's capable of doing that. And shifting your identity has its own puzzle, so to speak, to put together to get to that point. But that's mindset plays such a big, vital component of getting results and maintaining results, whether it be a physical goal, whether it be an emotional goal, a spiritual goal, whatever it is, mindset is very, very important. And when I learned that, that's when I dove full speed ahead into mindset, and it really took on a life of its own. And I've really been focused on and studying and learning it ever since, because I really believe that's the gateway to really creating the life that we all want to create.
When we talk about, things like mindset, we're starting to hear so much more about that. And I think one of the things that's really interesting too is when I was at Microsoft, actually it was shortly after they got their new CEO, Satya Nadella, he strongly recommended Carol Dweck's book about mindset and the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And growth mindset really became the mantra for everything he was driving folks to do in the company. And that actually, sort of coincided with the dramatic change in Microsoft's own performance and stock growth over the last 4 to 5 years.
That book is fantastic, by the way. And what it really comes down to is belief and focus. And that's really what it drills down to. And the fact that your mindset really controls, it's the basis or the foundation, I should say, for learning. Or if you have that growth mindset, you don't focus on failure. You don't focus on it because the failure doesn't really matter. It's what can I take from this? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And it's about playing the long game over the long term. It's not just about what does this one instance say about me, whether I failed or not, because failure in and of itself isn't even real. Failure is something that we construct in our own minds because we didn't meet our own expectations. When we expect something to happen and it doesn't happen, we say we failed. In the grand scheme of things, the perspective is so much greater from that end because when something happens, for instance, I was a chef, like I just said, just because I'm not a chef today doesn't mean I failed. I had to go through that process. Me going through the process of being a chef really played a huge part in who I am today and what I'm doing now. Being a chef, I had to go, now that I look back on that, I had to go through that process in order to learn the work ethic, to learn what it takes, to learn to be committed, to learn how to be obsessive in a good way about the things that I'm passionate about, what I'm passionate about. Just like when Thomas Edison was working on the light bulb. The story goes, there was one of his attempts, and he had many attempts. Some stories some stories that we read tell us he had up to 10,000 attempts before he actually invented the light bulb, and him and his team. But one of the times towards the end when he was getting close, but they had just enough attempts to be frustrated, but not enough yet to actually invent it. And he tried something and there was a big explosion. And he ran over and grabbed his journal and started writing frantically. And so his assistant went over and was, giving him some verbal abuse and saying, why are we still doing this? Why are you smiling? Why are you writing? We failed again. And Thomas Edison, the story goes, just looked at him and said, we didn't fail. I just discovered a way to create an explosion. I might need this later. And he's writing down how he did that. And, that's how you look at things. Just because one event can lead to another. Just because we have some expectation in our mind, just because we have a way that we want it to work out doesn't mean that's the best way. And what if what you're doing right now, even though maybe it doesn't work out, but maybe you learn that one thing from this that you need to create something even bigger that you've never even imagined. And so, failure in and of itself to me isn't even a thing.
Well, and that's the importance. That's part of what the growth mindset is all about is having that flexibility. And one of the things I encourage folks to do on this podcast is that one of the things to do when you're doing a talk, when you're conducting a presentation, is that afterwards you need to do a report, even for yourself, of what worked, what didn't, what questions that people asked, so you can know for the future what you're going to do and how you're going to improve. If you're always worried about failing and doing something wrong, you're not going to be in the position to grow. You're not going to be in the position to improve yourself and become more effective down the road. Back in my show, when I was making the transition from cooking into coaching, and I said I started as a weight loss coach. One of the first things I did, because I came from the chef world, everyone kept asking me, what can I eat? What can I eat? Because most people think that when they want to lose weight, they need to eat grilled chicken and salads or grilled chicken and broccoli, and that's all they can ever eat the rest of their lives. And that's nothing could be further from the truth. But they were always about what can I eat? So I wrote a couple cookbooks for people to help them on their eating journey so that they can still maintain their health goals, but still eat things that they enjoy. And so to promote these cookbooks, I did a lot of live cooking demonstrations. So I'd have an audience. And when I first started, I ended up doing over 50 TV appearances. But one of the ones when I first got started, before I even got in front of these big corporations and into these supermarkets and was doing these live demonstrations,
I would book a hotel room and like a small hotel conference room. And I would go out and talk to people and I would invite them and I would put 10 to 15 people in a room and I would do my demonstration and promote my cookbook there. And the second one I ever did, the first one, it was rough because it's the first time you ever do it, so you get up and you try to do the best you can. And I made it work. And the thing of it was I had to take all my own equipment. It all had to be electric. So I had an induction burner. I had a little convection oven. I had a couple other little gadgets that I would use. And
TSA must love you.
Yeah, they were all mine. I paid for all of them. And so I had a little investment going on here. And so I went to this one event, and this one was in my hometown, and I set everything up, and, I made hors d'oeuvres for everyone, and I was ready to go, and about 15 people showed up, and I start cooking. I had this whole menu planned, and I would cook it, and then I would serve the people that came. They would get to eat what I made. And so I start cooking, and it's about 10 minutes into the presentation. And apparently I used too much electricity for all my cooking gadgets because it's flipped the breaker. And so you try cooking with no heat and see how that works.
Right.
It's very difficult. And the hotel tried to fix it and they couldn't. And then they finally did fix it about a half an hour later. And after they fixed it, I'm trying to cook everything real fast because, I'm sweating bullets and I have this live audience there, and it sets off the fire alarm. So the whole fire company ends up showing up, and it was just this real big to do. And people paid for these tickets to be there. So I felt terrible. I mean, I tried to give them as much free stuff as I could, and I kept going. I never stopped, even though I was trying to cook without heat, and I was showing them the processes. And it was a real growing experience for me, let me tell you. But here's what I'll tell you. I kept my head down. I kept going because I was just trying to serve. I was trying to serve the audience. They came, they were interested, they paid to be there, and I wanted to give them as much value as I possibly could. And at the end, I'm apologizing to everyone profusely, which I felt terrible. A lady comes up to me at the end who I never met before, and she introduced herself to me, and she said, "That was pretty rough, huh?" And I just laughed. I said, I have nothing other than laughter right now, because I was 6 years in the restaurant under extreme pressure, and that was probably the most brutal thing I had to put my head down and get through. And she said, "Well, let me tell you what, I work for KDKA, which is the local news station, and we do a segment on Saturday or on weekday mornings where we bring in people to, do demonstrations on TV. And if you did this good without working equipment, I'd love to see what you could do with equipment." And that was the first TV gig I ever got. And after that, I did over 50 more. But the point is, that was the worst case scenario period that could have ever happened to me if you would have asked me before I did that. And it was a struggle and it was rough. But from that came the opportunity to do the rest of everything else. And that went on to become its own radio show. I had my own TV program after that. After doing the other TV, I wrote another cookbook. And then after all of that, here I am with this mindset podcast that now I have all the skills and all the knowledge that I've accrued over that time to be able to launch completely in a very confident way, and to do more public speaking and to serve in the way that now I believe I found my true calling. I really feel that way. But going through all of that growth and all of those opportunities and all of those other things that happened led me to be able to do this. And 10 years ago, this wasn't even a thought. So my point is, the worst thing that could have happened to me being in front of a crowd, the worst thing that could have happened to me public speaking happened, and it led to the best case scenario.
That's awesome. So going from something like that would scare a lot of folks away from public speaking. But those of us who do a lot of presentations, we get something else out of the act of being on that stage, being in front of folks. That's, it's almost kind of its own sickness sometimes. But what is it that you really like about public speaking? What inspires your passion for getting up there on the stage?
It's serving, really. I mean, it's when I sit down and I coach someone one-on-one and I see them have a breakthrough, it's phenomenal, because someone who I'm helping, they reach their outcome, and you can really see that light switch turn, so to speak, and then really break through and get to the next level. But from the stage, you can affect many people at one time. So you can, instead of one-to-one, it's one-to-many. I enjoy that. But where it really comes from for me, I believe that we're all born with something intuitively that we bring to the world. We all have a uniqueness within us. We all have a special calling. We all have something that's inside us that nobody else has that we bring to the world uniquely. And it's our purpose and our mission to find what that is, to cultivate it, and to serve the world. The examples I like to use are like when you look at someone like the Beatles, when you look at Elvis Presley, when you look at Michael Jordan, when you look at LeBron James, when you look at Wayne Gretzky, when you look at any of Babe Ruth, these people were born, they weren't born with the skill set developed to be the greatest in the world. Muhammad Ali, for instance, they weren't born with that. They were born with a talent, no doubt, with something unique within them, no doubt, but they had to foster that over time and develop that to get to the level in which they got. They didn't fall to the top. And I think that we all have that within us. We all have something within us that if we foster, we can get to that level. For me, and I like to look at what did you do intuitively when you were a child, because children have no filters. They haven't had time to develop them yet. They haven't had time to have the outside world tell them to grow up and be realistic up to a certain point. So I like to look at what they do. And for me, when I was a child, when I was just walking, just talking, I intuitively my dad, like I said, was a chiropractor, and his office was connected to our home, and there was a baby gate that separated the two. And I would sneak over that gate and go into the waiting room where there were patients, and I would perform. And that's just what I did. I would watch The Wizard of Oz, and Dumbo and Willy Wonka, those 3 movies, over and over and over again until I had them memorized. And I'm talking, I wasn't even 2 years old yet. I would have these things memorized. I was talking at a very early age, and I would hop over this little fence. I would climb it. It was very tall for me at the time, but I figured it out. Mm-hmm. And I would take props over, and I would go and act these things out in the waiting room for the patients. And they still come, if I'm at the office and I stop to say hi and visit, there's still patients to this day, 30 years later, that will tell me they remember seeing me in the waiting room acting. And that was just part of who I was, getting in for performing. But as I got older and as I matured and as I got into the other areas of my life that I'm passionate about, I realized that acting's and performing's close brother is teaching. And so teaching became something to me because I'm very analytical and I like to learn, and I love to learn, and I love to grow, and I love to develop. And so being able to do that and then take that and intuitively be able to serve many people at one time with that and helping them develop and create breakthroughs. So it's really about service. It's about being able to serve many people and doing it in a way that I believe is just something that I was born with, that, like you said, it's almost like a sickness. And I don't think it's really a sickness, but it's something inside you. It's like a gene, or it's something that you're born with, that some people, they like to consume music. That's their thing. Some people like to play music. That's their thing. Some people play sports. Some people, are very intelligent, become scientists and doctors and lawyers. And some people become chefs. And some people like to be in front of other people teaching. And that's just where I fit in. And that's what I'm passionate about. And it's not about me. It's about serving, like I said. And it's about that being able to serve many people at one time and to really magnify your impact. And it's about that message, because I believe that, like I said, we all have a calling. And I believe part of my calling is that message that we're all unique. We're all perfect at our core. We all have something to bring to the world. What is your something? And don't be afraid to take that uniqueness that you have and develop it and let it shine for everyone else to see, because that's what the world needs. The world needs you to be you, because nobody else can be you. So you need to be you. You need to take what that unique gift is that you have and use it to serve as many people as possible, because there are people out there praying for what you have. There are people out there that need what only you can give them. So you have an obligation not only to yourself, because that's where you'll find true fulfillment, but to everyone else, to develop that talent, to develop that calling, and use it to serve people. And I think that's what mine is.
It's interesting how you talk about going back to what you were doing as a little kid. There were plenty of times when, as a little kid, I would sit there playing with my parents' big reel-to-reel tape recorder and just record my own little speeches or rants about whatnot, sort of podcasting before there was such a thing.
Absolutely.
And it's funny how that comes into play. The other thing that I think is an interesting thread through this is that you talk about performing and you talk about service. Also, as a chef, you're serving and performing and producing really high quality meals for folks, and everything from appearance and presentation to taste and environment and all of that. So I think it's really interesting how those core passions try to come through regardless of what we end up doing vocationally.
A lot of people ask me, well, how do I know? How do I know what, my purpose is or what I'm meant to do or what I'm passionate about? And the answer is you just know. If you feel like it's pulling you, then that's the answer. Because if you feel like you have to push to do something, if you feel like you're pushing, anytime you push anything, it pushes back. And so that's not the answer. You don't want to have to. Willpower will only take you so far and you only have so much of it. So you can't be pushing, but there's typically something for everyone that continues to show up. No matter how much you try to shake it, how much you try to run from it, how much you don't want to believe that that's it, it's there. And some of us just embrace it and we love it. But other people, they want to be more realistic, or the world tells them not to pursue it, and it just keeps pulling at them. It just keeps pulling them in a direction. And that typically, it may not be exactly what it is you're supposed to do, but typically it has something to do with the path you're supposed to be on to figure out what it is you're supposed to do. And it may not be, whatever's pulling you, it may not, I'm not saying that you should give up everything you're doing right now and go pursue that. That's not the answer. I'm saying you should at least invest energy into that, because where you will find real true fulfillment is when you're putting your passion and your energy into what your true purpose is, and you're taking that uniqueness and that calling and giving it to the world, because only through giving do we be received. So if you want to receive fulfillment, you have to give what is uniquely you and what you have to serve other people. And that's the way that I go about it typically, is what's pulling me, what keeps showing up. Even though I'm not focused on it, it keeps coming into play and it keeps guiding me. And, it all comes back to the whole teaching, performing, speaking for me. And that's how I know that's what that is. And when you say cooking and you go back to being a chef, I have always seen myself as an artist. And so at heart. And so that's where that came into play and where that comes from. And I always admire musicians, and in particular for some reason. And I look at the ones who write their own music, perform their own music. And there's always it's that process of you have this idea and then you birth it into the world. And sometimes it can be a daunting process and sometimes it comes real easy. But if you listen to the really good musicians who've written like the Paul Simons or the Billy Joels or the Elton Johns, or those types, the Beatles, Elvis, and you listen to how did they write their songs? I always like to watch those documentaries and those YouTube videos about how they actually did the process. And you hear one thing that keeps coming up over and over again, and it's that the certain song, whichever piece is that's the best, that they're most known for, they say that typically when they wrote it, it was something else that was coming through them. They were just at a different place and it just came through them. They can't go back to that. And the way this relates to me is when I'm in front of a group and when I'm in the zone and when I'm in the flow, or when I'm at peak state, as I call it, and I'm delivering my message and people are receiving it. And I just know that I nail it and I serve and they get it. Afterwards, if there's not a recording of that, I will have no idea what I said. I know I nailed it. I know it was spot on. I know how it felt, but I don't know what was said. And so that's how it is. Like when they go and they write these songs, these masterpieces, so to speak, they don't know where it comes from. And I feel that same way. And that's called being at peak state or being in the flow. And so I've always seen myself as kind of an artist. And as they write their song and they perform it time and time and time again. So Billy Joel's probably sang Piano Man 10,000 times. He performs it at every show. And so I have pieces that I've created and that I've grown that I do over and over and over again that I feel like, they just come through me. They're not my own per se, but I feel like I am the person that brought them, that brings them to light, that shares them with people, that shares that message to help them grow.
I find that I really know I've nailed it and hit that stage when I wrap up and I actually feel my teeth tingling from just the residual energy.
Yeah.
When I've encountered getting into that flow most, it's almost sort of an out of body thing. With a talk that I have done maybe 30, 40, 50 times over the course of several weeks, where the words can happen on autopilot, but then there's this separate undercurrent of energy that starts to come through and really starts exploding, so that even though I may have used those same words in that same sequence multiple times with audiences, each audience is still getting a unique experience of that same content and of that same moment. One of the things that I tell folks all the time, and that one of my pet peeves, is when people refer to a slide deck as a presentation or a PowerPoint file as a presentation, because it is not a presentation. A presentation is something that happens at a specific point in time and space. And I cannot send someone a presentation. I can send someone the slides. I can send someone a recording of a presentation, but I can't send somebody a presentation, because the presentation is there. And when the presentation is over, that one is over, and that exact thing is never going to happen again. That temporary community of speaker and audience exists once and once only.
I agree with you. And that's such a powerful thing. I mean, it's so powerful. And, for me, I believe that if you know your material enough and you know it well enough, and I feel like the people that if you present in front of a substantial group, you should know your material inside and out, upside down and backwards. And if you know it enough, then you can just, like you said, go on autopilot, because you know what it is. And at that point, it almost becomes like a meditative thing, because you're coming out with, and I think that, and when I talk to people about meditation really is when there's that bridge that opens between your unconscious and your conscious mind. And I believe that when we are at a certain energy, when we're at a certain level, we can actually pull better ideas and better thoughts, because thoughts aren't our own. Thoughts come to us, but they come to everyone. They're almost like that ticker on the, if you've ever watched like ESPN or a sports station and you see that ticker that goes across the bottom of the screen, that's like what thoughts are. And you can choose which thoughts you accept and hold on to and which ones you get rid of. And I believe that if you can get into that meditative state, like you said, because you know your material so well, because you've done it so many times, and because more than anything, because you're so passionate about it, now you can allow your unconscious mind to latch on to different, more empowering, better, more impactful thoughts that you can then share with the audience. And when you get to that point, now you have that community that you talked about that's very powerful. And that's why a lot of times when I have those experiences where I don't really remember exactly what was said or how it was said, is because I was kind of at that place where I'm letting the unconscious kind of take over, even though I'm still consciously there. And I'm sharing these thoughts or this energy that comes from somewhere else that it's almost working through you to help share that message. And that's why I believe that the message is so important, and you're there to share that message, but the message doesn't necessarily have to be your own, because it's not the message in and of itself that's unique. It's you that is unique. It's the presenter that's unique, and your unique perspective on that message, your unique delivery of that message, the way that you communicate that message is what makes it unique and is what makes it powerful. If you take a message that someone else delivered and you just read it monotone word for word, it does nothing. But if you take that message and you read it as you, because you are unique and you are special and you are perfect at your core, now it becomes powerful. Now it becomes something that other people can latch onto, can take impact from, and can then use in their own life in their own way to make a profound difference.
That is so true. And I know that the experienced speakers out there in the audience are sort of nodding along and agreeing with us on that. But a significant portion of the folks that are out there are listening to this thinking you're talking about meditating on stage and letting this message go through and going on autopilot. And I am just happy if I can get out there and keep control of my bladder.
Yes.
So, I mean, the fear that so many people have of doing that and engaging with that audience can be so powerful for a lot of folks. So how do you coach folks to deal with things like that fear of public speaking?
Well, the first thing you need to realize is it's not about you. And so that knowing that should take a huge weight off your shoulders, because it seems like the funny thing to me is people, when they get up in front of the room, now I would be willing to bet that 95% of your life, whenever there was a talk present or a speech or a lesson, whatever it is, when there was a speaker and an audience, 95% of the time you're probably we're in the audience. If you're someone who is nervous and fearful, it's probably because you don't have as much experience of being a speaker and you're afraid of the bad things that could happen. So you spend most of your time in the audience. But when you get up on that stage and you're in front of the audience, something happens where we forget what it's like to be the audience. And you forget that when you're in the audience and a speaker messes up, don't you usually cut them some slack? don't you usually laugh along? You don't think anything of it because they have the guts to stand up there and actually do that. And they have the passion and the purpose to deliver something that's very important to them.
And that's if you even notice that mistake to begin with.
Exactly. And so knowing that, and if you can put yourself back in that place of what it's like to be in the audience, now you can feel a little more confidence because you know that the people in the audience, they're not going to laugh at you. They don't want to laugh at you. They're there for themselves. They're there to hear your message and they're on your side. It's not like I'm here and you're there. It's like we're all like, Bill, when you described it as a community, that was the perfect term. I've never heard it described in that fashion using that word, but that's what it is. And that's the perfect way to say it. It's a community and people in a community support each other. So once you know that that audience is there to support you, number one, and number two, that's number two. Number one is it's not about you. It's about the message. It's not about, whenever you have that fear, whenever you're afraid of messing up, you're putting the focus on yourself because you're thinking of how you're going to feel if they laugh at you, if they say something, and you're making it about you. So you have to take that off and say, no, it's not about me. It's about them. It's about how can I serve? How can I contribute to the people who came here today so that when this is all said and done and when they're walking out the door, they have value. They have something that they can apply to their lives to not only make their lives better, but that they can also tell other people to make their lives better so that you make that ripple effect. So it's not about you. It's about them. So once you get over that, and then once you realize that it's a community and they're there to support you, now you can stand a little taller. You can feel a little more confident. And once you get started, you can actually focus on that message, focus on delivering that value, focus on the task at hand, what you're there for, not all the things that can go wrong. The other thing is when you think about like what you focus on and what you focus on, you find whatever you're looking for, you're going to find that. And one of the stories that I hear all the time that I like to equate to this is if you're driving in the car, and they teach drivers this, professional drivers this, if you're driving in the car and you swerve off the road and you're going towards a branch, the first thing you want to do is look away from that branch because you drive to where you're looking. Wherever your focus is where you're driving. If you look straight at that branch, you're going to drive right into it. And so it's the same thing when you're up on that stage and when you're thinking about what you focus on, you're going to find. So if you're focused on messing up and you're focused on the bad things that can happen, you're going to go straight towards those bad things or what you perceive to be bad things because they may not even be bad things. Like I said, when I did that demonstration where none of my equipment worked and it was a complete catastrophe and people paid to be there, it ended up being the best thing that could happen because if I would have nailed it and everything would have gone perfect, maybe she wouldn't have come up to talk to me afterwards. Maybe it would have gone longer and she would have been in a hurry and left. And I would have never gotten that opportunity to take the next step, which was to go do the television program. So just because something that you perceive as bad happens, it may be the best thing for you in the long run. It may teach you something that you can use to do the next talk. And the next talk may be the one that really hits that one person that makes that profound difference, that changes the game for them in their life. And in turn changes your life because you were able to do that. So it's not about you. They're there to support you and realize that it's all how you perceive it. Don't focus on the bad. What would happen if instead of thinking about all the different ways you could mess up, if you thought about all the different ways that you could nail this thing, that you could be in the flow, be in peak state, be delivering your message on point without forgetting anything, with, putting it all on the line, giving it your all, your passion with purpose and really making a difference and having it. Because at the end of the day, if you're a professional speaker, and I know a lot of you listening may not be professional yet, you may have aspirations of being a professional, but when you're a professional speaker, it's not about the applause. It's not about people coming up to you and telling you how great you did. It's about them taking your message and applying it to their lives and getting that difference, making that impact in their lives, creating that impact. So what is your outcome? And delivering to the people that are there to get that outcome. Because when it's about applause and when it's about the praise and how good you did, then it's about you again. And when you're up there and you're delivering that message, you're delivering. It's not about you. It's about what can I give? What piece of me can I give? What passion can I give? What purpose can I give? What message can I give that is uniquely me that makes these people that are here in this audience take that next step, whatever that may be. and change their lives and go after what they're going after, or become something or learn something or do something that is going to serve them in the long run. So make it about them and always look to serve, and you'll never be on the wrong side of the fence.
And that's a powerful mindset shift to make as a speaker, and especially as a nervous speaker. And what you've done, and obviously mindset is the thing that flows through all of this. And you actually have a daily podcast all about mindset. And, first of all, the idea of a daily podcast and the work involved with that is it just makes me tired just thinking about that. But how does your 10-minute mindset podcast fit in with your journey now?
It really fits in all the way around because it does a few things. Number one, the reason why it's 7 days a week, and when I did my radio show in the past, it was 1 day a week. It was every Saturday and it was an hour long. And I decided that when I did the mindset, it's much more valuable to the listener for them to have something they can count on every single day, even if it's smaller. I think 10 minutes a day over the course of a week consistently, because consistency is key, is much more powerful than 1 hour, 1 day a week, just in the mindset arena. So I wanted to help them create a new habit, create a habit of every morning on my way to work, I listen to this. Every morning when I'm brushing my teeth, whatever they're doing at that time, they have this new content to listen to that will help them focus on the things that are important to them, and maybe teach them something as well and introduce them to new guests, but it'll give them this new habit that they do consistently on a daily basis. That was the first thing. The second thing was, it gives me more reason to actively learn, because even though I learn and even though I do develop and do personal growth on a consistent basis, this forces me to come up with material every single day. And I like the challenge. I love it. That's what drives me, because it gives me more to give. It makes me become more, so I have more to give and help others with. And the other thing, the real selfish reason why 10-minute mindset is what it is because I had a bad habit and a really difficult time waking up in the morning. This is the honest truth. If I didn't have a meeting client scheduled, or a meeting or a talk or something to do early in the morning, it was really, I would stay up late, and I wanted to sleep in every day. And so what I decided to do was give myself a reason to contribute first thing in the morning, because it starts my day out on a positive note. It allows me to give and contribute first thing in the morning, and it makes sure that I am up clicking on all cylinders right away with everyone else. And so that's how it really fits into my life. It helps me focus on the things that are important first thing in the morning while contributing to others right out of the gate. And it helps other people get into that habit of putting good things, because your mind, I know you've heard this before, but your mind is like a garden. So if you do nothing to it, the weeds will grow. You do not have to do anything for weeds to grow. But if you want it to be lush and you want it to be fertile and you want there to be beautiful flowers and foliage and all of that stuff, you have to put the work in. You have to do the gardening. You have to do the planting. You have to take care of those things. And so this gives people 10 minutes every morning, and 10 minutes is not that long of a period of time. You can really get a lot done in 10 minutes if you do it consistently every single day. And that's the purpose of 10-minute mindset, is to get your mindset aligned 10 minutes every single day to set the foundation for your day so that you're ready to attack on all cylinders the rest of the day, because momentum happens regardless. You're either from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, you're building momentum. The question is, are you building it in an intentional way towards the outcomes you want to create? Or are you letting circumstance and the things around you dictate what direction you go in? If you have certain things you want to create, if you're not completely happy and you're not actively living the life that you desire right now, it's probably because of the mindset that has created certain behaviors in your life that aren't really serving you. So if you can start over, if you can start the day intentionally, and you can start to put actions and behaviors in place that will actually guide you to the outcomes that you want to achieve. And by the way, those outcomes need to be clear. They need to be compelling. Then you can start to build momentum over time towards the direction you want to go in. And consistency is way more important than length, because what I mean by that is it's much more valuable to do 10 minutes a day every morning than it is to do 8 hours on a Monday and then not do it for 2 weeks. You can't make up for consistency with one extended period it's like cramming for a test. It's much easier to study a little bit each day and learn little bits of information that compound and get you ready than it is to sit for 12 hours before the test and try to get that whole book into your mind. So this is kind of the same way that I work that. But mindset is an ongoing journey. It's not something that you ever reach that destination. It's something that you constantly have to be aligning and working with and tailoring, especially because your outcomes will become more and more specific every time you work on them. My outcomes change on a weekly basis. I have a clear and compelling future that I want to create for myself so that I can become more, to give more and do more. But every day there's little tweaks that happen. So it becomes more and more specific so that I can take better suited action to build more momentum to get me to those outcomes. And that's what I'm trying to help other people create in their lives as well.
That's really interesting. There's a couple of really interesting things in there, especially when you talk about being deliberate and being intentional, because so many of the things that happen in our lives seem to happen to us because we don't make active decisions about what they're doing. We let our lives go on autopilot, and actually deciding what to do and choosing a direction can have a huge impact. The other thing that's really interesting there is when you talk about consistency, one of the things that really comes out in your podcast is you start each episode, the first several minutes are really essentially the same content each day in almost a pattern, or almost it made me think of the liturgical patterns we see in church. Not to say your podcast is religious, but embracing some of those same things where, well, especially those who've been to Catholic churches know that the prayers are often the same week to week for a big chunk of it. And there is that repetition. Could you talk a little bit about why you choose to structure things that way?
Absolutely. And I love the take that you have. It's just so interesting to me that you see it as, because I never put that together about it being liturgical, but you're absolutely right now that I look back at it and look at your interpretation. The way I see it is, as I said earlier, I've always seen myself as an artist, and I look at those musicians that I admire and how they write their songs. So I look at that beginning part as like one of my greatest hits, so to speak. And every day when I go on to do it, it's like I'm performing that song again. But I do it a little bit differently.
Billy Joel has to play Piano Man.
Exactly. And I do it a little bit differently every day, but I've heard Billy Joel play Piano Man live many times, and he does it a little bit different every time as well. It just depends on the mood. But the real reason for that is because that is the habit. Like I said, I believe our life really comes down to our habits, and our habits come from our mindset. And so if we can create a habit every single morning where we are focused on our outcome. Okay. And so what Bill is really talking about is what I call the GEO method. And this is something that I didn't have created when I actually started the podcast. This actually came from doing the podcast. And the GEO method is GIO. And I typically work it from back to front. So I actually start with the O, and it stands for outcome, intention, gratitude. And so we start with our outcome, and we focus on a clear and compelling outcome. And it has to be clear because it has to be specific. We talked about that. And it has to be compelling because it has to excite you, especially when the obstacles come up. Because if it is something that you don't have yet, it's because you haven't grown into the person and the identity that can create that in your life yet. So you're going to have to go through some growth, and growth is painful. It can be. And so when you go through that pain, it has to be compelling enough to help you push through that and to continue on the journey. So the outcome has to be clear and compelling. So I like to tell people I have a journal that is dedicated completely to my outcomes. I call it my outcome journal, and I write my outcome every morning. Every morning I write out my outcome. I write it and I say it and I feel it and I put emotion behind it. And every week, I should say, it gets a little bit clearer. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about outcomes. But we start with that because you always want to create the action items based on your outcome. You don't want to just add items to a to-do list and do vague things, because if you do that, you'll get vague results. So we have the specific outcome that we focus on and we start with. Then we get into the intention, which is the I of GEO. And the intention is, what do I intend to do about this now? And I always tell people to break it down into 3 pieces. What am I going to do right now within the hour? What am I going to do within the next 24 hours? And what am I going to do over the course of this week? And so you have 3 different action items that you focus on each day. And you want to get one thing done within the hour, because when you identify and you write and you recite that clear and compelling outcome, now you're in peak state. Now you have as much energy and focus behind it. As soon as you walk out that door and you go into your day-to-day life, your focus is going to get split in 50 different directions. And you're not going to be at this place where you're focused and you have a bunch of energy behind this outcome. Again, typically at some point today. So right now, before you lose that, do one thing. no matter how small it is, do something that's going to build momentum towards that. And then you have something else that you set an intention over the course of the 24 hours that you're also working on, and then something that you work on a little bit every day throughout the week. And then finally, the G and G is what I think is the most important, is gratitude. And so what can get you into that state of gratitude? Not just thinking about it, not just saying you're grateful, but actually feeling and getting into that state of gratitude. And this is where I typically meditate. So there's a little bit of journaling, there's a little bit of meditation, and I focus on 3 things I'm grateful for. Something I'm able to get every day, something I'm able to give every day, and something that I am, to kind of shift that identity into who I want to become. So I am unstoppable, I am bold, I am powerful, things of that nature. And you want to say them out loud. You want to put your energy behind them, put your physiology behind them, and really say, because we have a lot of self-talk throughout the day, and typically our self-talk is pretty not good, to say the least. It's pretty negative. And so, we think we can treat ourselves that way because we'll never be able to leave ourselves. But that's not really the best way to do it. So I really want to get intentional, and I have my listeners, I encourage them to get intentional about talking to yourself in a manner in which you are your biggest fan, where you love yourself more than anything else, because you are perfect at your core. As I've said, you are unique. So acknowledge that, embrace it. Tell yourself, I am unstoppable. I am powerful, because whenever these challenges come up in your life, whenever you're challenged, you will revert to what is the most comfortable. And that's your identity is such. So if your identity is, you are unstoppable, you are bold, you always figure it out, you will find a way, you're going to intuitively go to that place and you will find a way. If you have the identity that nothing ever works out for me, this always happens to me, the world's out to get me, there's all these problems, then that's what's going to show up, and that's what you're going to prove to yourself time and time again, because our greatest need as human beings is to act consistently with who we believe we are. Whoever you believe you are, you're going to act consistent with that. You have to. So if you can have yourself believe that you're unstoppable, that you always figure out a way, that you will get it done, then you will begin to take steps and actions that prove that to yourself. Whereas if you believe the opposite, you'll do the opposite. So that's why we start the day every day. And I like to mix it up a little bit. So like I said, I have that journal, so I always write my outcomes. When it comes to intentions, I like to put those in my phone. So you know how I have an iPhone, so there's a notes section in there, or notes app. I use the notes app because it has a little check mark feature, so I can check them off as I do them. So that's how I do the intentions. And then finally, my gratitude, I like to meditate. So I like to take 5 minutes or so and really sit there and really get into that state of gratitude and really feel the feelings and really imagine taking that gratitude and letting it emanate from me and just covering the whole world and everyone, and really getting it. Because when you're in a state of true state of gratitude, you cannot feel a negative emotion. You cannot be in a negative place, because gratitude cannot exist with anything negative. So getting into that state of gratitude and being able to do it consistently, it's like a muscle. The more you practice getting into deep gratitude, the easier it is for you to get into time and time again. So if you can get into that state and you practice that, then you can do it consistently throughout the day in more places. And being in a state of gratitude is one of the most resourceful states to be in, because if you get rid of those expectations that you put on yourself, because we said failure is when you expect something to happen and it doesn't. But if you can get rid of that and you don't expect, but you're just grateful, then no matter what happens, it's not going to be a bad thing. And you can get resourceful and you can use it, and you'll see the opportunity and you'll make things happen with that.
Wow, it's pretty powerful stuff, and especially to be able to start the day with that. So 10-Minute Mindsets is available through Apple Podcasts and wherever fine podcasts are available.
Yes.
And if folks want to learn more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
They can go right online. My website is marioporreca.com, MARIOPORRECA.com. Everything's there. We have a 10-Minute Mindset group on Facebook where it's a great group with people busy achievers who get together, and the podcast itself gets broadcast to that group. So you can go there and check it out. Video versions of it are available there, plus just people supporting each other, helping each other. So that's the best place on Facebook to reach me and to get into that community and actually be an active part of what's happening with 10-Minute Mindset, and to be able to harness that momentum throughout the day.
Awesome. And we'll have all of those links also available in the show notes for this episode of 2-Minute Talk Tips. So Mario, great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and it's an honor to be here and to speak to your listeners. And I hope that they take value from this and that it serves them and that it gives them just a little more confidence to be able to step up on that stage, to be able to take that next step, to be able to really dive in and think about what is my message? What is my uniqueness? What do I have to bring to the world? What is it that I can give that fills me up, that nobody else can do, that makes me unique? And then take that message and craft it and hone it and practice it, get up on that stage, put it in front of as many people as possible. And that's where success and fulfillment will be found.
Lots of great stuff in there. If you'd like to connect with Mario, head on over to marioporreca.com or just check out the show notes for 2minutetalktips.com/Mario. So that's it for this week. What are your thoughts about mindset? Let us know in the comments over at 2minutetalktips.com/Mario. Be sure to check out Mario's 10-Minute Mindset podcast and explore his website over at marioporreca.com. If you haven't done so already and have an Amazon Echo device, go ahead and walk up to it and say, "Alexa, enable 2-Minute Talk Tips." Practice your next talk in the shower. And, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
Two-Minute Talk Tips is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.